My new boyfriend Jake called me for breakfast and I went downstairs. But as soon as I entered the kitchen, I was dumbfounded. A huge black shepherd dog was standing next to Jake. It was baring its teeth and growling. I only moved in yesterday, and before that, he didn't say he had a dog. My stomach clenched with fright. As a child, I was bitten by a stray dog, and I was treated for a home. Since that day, I've been terrified of dogs. But Jake smiled and said it was just Buddy, his favorite. I just nodded, trying not to shake. After all, if I told the truth, Jake might think I was a problem and throw me out. And going back to my parents was not an option. My mom and dad are violent alcoholics, and therefore it was simply unbearable to be at home. I had long wanted to move out of their house, but I didn't have the money to do it. So when Jake showed up at the bar yesterday and asked me to move in with him after 2 hours of conversation, I immediately agreed. It was my chance to escape from my parents. But this terrible dog, how will I live here? The dog stopped growling and sat down next to Jake. All through breakfast, I thought he was going to attack me. I couldn't eat a single bite. I was still hungry. But at lunchtime, Jake brought a tray of food to my room. How thoughtful he was. He said I'd like it because it was a special sandwich, his mom's recipe. He also added that he had released the shepherd into the yard and now it was time for him to run to work. But he walked all day and didn't come back until late in the afternoon. I was glad that I would be able to rest without this terrible dog. When Jake left, I decided to clean up the house, and in the evening, in the wardrobe, I came across a box marked personal. Well, that's interesting. I couldn't resist opening it to see if there were pictures of Jake as a child. But inside was old women's clothing. What kind of nonsense? Why did he keep such things here? Suddenly I started. Someone was scratching at the door. This terrible dog wanted to go home. I shoved the box back in, but I was afraid to let the dog in. What if he bit me? Fortunately, the sound soon subsided. Then I cautiously went to the window to find out where the dog had gone. And suddenly the shepherd dog jumped right at me, barking. Oh dear, Jake did close the window. I barely dodged and fell to the floor. My god, he was going to eat me up. In a panic, I jumped up and ran for the exit, but the mad thing was not far behind. His black fur stood on end, and his eyes were bloodshot. He wanted to tear me to pieces. And then I saw Jake standing in the doorway. Thank God! The shepherd immediately stretched out in front of the owner as if he did not want to touch me. But I decided I'd had enough. I began to say that this wild dog chased me all over the house. I miraculously survived. Jake gave me a gentle hug and began to soothe me. He said that he would definitely come up with something so that I would not worry so much anymore. The next day, Jake took his buddy to a zoo psychologist. He said that he would correct his behavior in a couple of days. Thank God! We could finally be alone together without this monster! In the evening, we watched a romantic movie, but something was bothering me. That's right, that weird box in the closet. I wondered why Jake needed those old women's things. All of a sudden, Jake was yelling at me to stay out of the way. I was taken aback. Why was he so turned on? Then Jake seemed to come to his senses. He took my hand and painfully told me that these were his dead mom's things. She passed away recently and it was hard for him to talk about it. I tried to comfort Jake as best as I could, but the evening was ruined. Jake said he wanted to be alone and went to the basement for some reason. I never knew what he was doing there, but he came back late. And when I woke up, Jake was gone. Strange. Where did he go on the weekend? Jake hadn't shown up all day. And I was really scared. What if something had happened to him? I was about to call the police when the phone rang in the house. I didn't dare answer, but after a few rings, the answering machine came on. Jake, this is your mother. Where the hell are you? My stomach turned cold. What? Mother? But Jake said she was dead. I was terrified, but I quickly pulled myself together. I didn't believe in mysticism, so I don't think it was a call from the other world. And then I realized that Jake didn't want to tell me the truth about those women's things. He was hiding something. I decided to sort it out and went to the living room. I opened the same wardrobe, but the box seemed to have disappeared. Then it was like a nightmare. I heard the shepherd barking again. My god, did he run away from the zoo psychologist? And then there was a strange sound under the windows, as if someone was digging the ground. I looked out, and I saw this disgusting dog trying to get into the basement. In a panic, I rushed downstairs. I needed to close the basement window quickly so that the dog did not get in. But the dog was already there, and noticing me, he slowly approached me. Saliva dripped from his fangs. He was about to bite me. But suddenly the dog took me by the sleeve and began to pull me somewhere. I had no choice but to follow him, my legs stiff with fear. The dog shoved his face into the dusty wardrobe and stood waiting. I carefully opened the doors and saw there a bound girl. There were bruises and abrasions on her body. God, this is terrible. I couldn't believe it. I quickly untied her and asked her what was wrong. The girl's name was Maggie. After recovering from the shock, she revealed that she had met Jake at a cafe a week ago. He quickly offered to move in with him, and she agreed as she needed an apartment. I shuddered. I had everything exactly the same. But the day after they moved in, Maggie realized that Jake wasn't himself. It was as if he snapped and he kept repeating the phrase, "Mom, I didn't do it." Maggie tried to run away from him, but Jake tied her up and locked her in the basement. Maggie's story stunned me. Turned out Jake was a psycho? How could I have missed it? I saw how strangely he reacted to that box. I quickly explained to Maggie that we had to run. Jake might be back any minute. We rushed to the door, but suddenly the road was blocked. It was Jake. We didn't have time. He glanced quickly at Maggie and understood. Well, you'll have company now. He smiled at her madly. Then Jake pulled a rope from behind his back and grabbed us. We tried to fight back, but he still tied us up. After that, Jake said he'd be back soon and punish us. You are very bad. My mother would not approve of that. He whispered ominously. I was shaking with fear. And then I heard a noise at the closet. It was Buddy. He had been hiding under the wardrobe all this time. He crawled out of his hiding place and tried to bite through the ropes. Well done, Buddy, I said, patting him behind the ear. Wow, that was not as scary as I thought. Buddy couldn't do it. The ropes were very thick, but after 10 minutes, he finally freed us. Then we heard Jake's footsteps. Panicked, I looked around. The only way to escape was through the window, but it was so high. I somehow got Maggie up and she tried to pull me up, but she didn't have the strength. What to do? I couldn't jump high enough. I tried to find a chair or a box, but there was nothing, and then Buddy ran up to me. He offered his back and I was able to get out. At the same time, Jake burst into the basement. He was furious. We ran away from the house as fast as we could. I was hoping we'd get away in time. But then I saw Jake run out of the entrance and give chase. Damn it. The police station was only a block away. Maggie and I ran as fast as we could, but Jake was running after us, shouting wildly. He was right next to me, and he was grabbing my arm when suddenly Buddy jumped on him. It turned out that he was also running after us. The dog defended us bravely, but Jake threw him aside. He hit the ground hard and whined. But Buddy distracted Jake and I managed to push the trash cans on him. While Jake was recovering, Maggie ran into the station. But I couldn't leave Buddy. He'd saved my life. The dog barely moved, so I had to carry him. At the station, we immediately told the officer about everything and Jake was detained. We later found out that his mother was mentally ill and kept telling Jake that he was responsible for his sister's death. So Jake could not stand it and went crazy. Buddy was taken to the clinic. That crazy Jake broke some of his ribs. I was amazed at the courage of the dog. He was not afraid to attack the owner to save us. Tears welled up in my eyes. Maggie tried to calm me down. She said that he would soon be cured and put in a good shelter. But I couldn't even think about it. What if he's not well there? After the testimony, Maggie stayed at the station to wait for her relatives. I immediately went to see Buddy in the hospital. It was painful to look at him. He could hardly breathe in tears. I begged the doctor to cure Buddy. Dr. Steve promised to do everything possible, but warned that the damage was serious. I think I had nowhere to live again, and it was a good thing Maggie had let me stay with her. I went to the clinic every day to try to take care of Buddy, but he was still unconscious. Doc Steve was very supportive and told me that Buddy was going to get better. But one day, Steve came with bad news. The other doctors gathered a council and decided that Buddy was very ill and needed to be put down. Steve could not convince them. I burst into tears. I was terribly attached to Buddy during this time. In desperation, I burrowed into his thick fur. Please, Buddy, come to your senses. I love you so much, I whispered. And then I felt something hit me gently on the back. It was Buddy. He opened his eyes and was wagging his tail. I hugged him overjoyed. The power of love is capable of many things. I heard Steve's voice behind me. A few days later, Buddy and I arrived at Maggie's house. She didn't mind that we would now live with our savior. Steve often called, asking about Buddy's condition, and one day, he even asked me out on a date. I agreed, but I took Buddy with me because he was a great judge of character. It's still a good idea to get to know someone better before you start dating them.